So this is the last of our series on This Is Us, which we have been unpacking what it means to be a United Methodist. And one of the joys and privileges that I have in my job is that I serve on the North District Operations team. And what that is the Indiana Conference is broken into districts, and we are part of the North District. We have a conference superintendent, Marty Lundy. Some of you know her. She's part of our charge conference, and she's part of the cabinet, which sits in with the bishop. And so she has an operations team, and it's a team of individuals that she chooses, pastors and laity from the North District, that serve as the think tank to resource the local church. So we meet once a month, and for me, it is a very joyful time. I find a lot of energy and encouragement hearing from these other people that are doing phenomenal ministry and being able to resource the local church and connecting. My role specifically is to think towards children's ministry and resource those. And one of the things that we talked about when we met last Thursday, just a couple days ago, was a question that the conference has been putting out, the district has been putting out, and the bishop is asking, and our strategic planning team is asking, what does it mean to be Indiana UMC? And what do you want it to mean to be Indiana UMC? And the challenge that I have with that is probably most places, people that go to churches or people that drive by a church don't know at all what that even means. And so hopefully over the course of this series, over the past 3 months, you can kind of think and you can kind of reflect and you have a better understanding of what it means to be United Methodist and connected locally in Indiana in the North District. Hopefully you can think about what it means in terms of baptism, in terms of grace, in terms of our Wesleyan heritage, understanding what it means to be part of the mission, understanding the global connection with the United Methodist Church through UMCOR, which Pastor Karen talked about, our camping ministries. So I would just like to invite you to think about that and reflect on it as we close out the series. And as you think about that, start to think about what does that mean for you? Because I think it does have a local context, but it also has a bigger global context too. So this is an exciting time because right now we are finishing this series and then we are going on and we are celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ and going through Holy Week. So today we are talking about the nurture and the mission of the church, which is something that we find in the book of Discipline. So I want to talk a little bit about the history of small groups, where that comes from, the nurture of the church. So we know that John Wesley, in his time, was exploring what a heart theology looked like, that it couldn't just be a faith based in your head and understanding and intellectual, but it had to be something that came from your heart. Before that, in the 1700s, a man by the name of Jacob Philip Senior was attempting to renew the Lutheran Church, and he was exploring the same type of thing, and he was offering a plan that included what we might call today small groups. What he called at that time was colleges of piety. Now, these were not colleges at all, but they were small groups of lay people that were gathering together in homes for prayer and Bible study. Now, they were working on carrying out the mission of the church. The English equivalent, which is where John Wesley was coming out of, they were called religious societies. So when we think about societies today, we kind of have a different context. But in John Wesley's time, when we're thinking about these colleges of piety and these religious societies, we're talking about small groups. And we're talking about faith formation that's happening beyond the corporate community. So John Wesley and his small group, they were exploring what this meant to have a heartwarming understanding of God. They were looking at tradition and scripture and reason and experience and helping that to create an understanding of what it meant to live out their faith. And they were doing this in the context of a small group of people. John Wesley's small group of people was called the Oxford Holy Club. As that was emerging, that's what they were looking at. The small group of people, they were studying and they were praying together and they were worshiping together and they were serving together. And they were reaching out to those in their community that were in need the most. Now, the Methodist movement in itself was kind of a replication of this small group of people that was learning how to disciple others with a focus on love and God and their neighbor. Now, one of the things I came across this week was when I was reading this about history of this movement, because you look at this big movement, but then it has to be something else too. There has to be a smaller component. And what they said was the Methodist denomination grew from 4 people to over 100,000 people in Wesley's lifetime. From the origin of Methodism, a group of 4 men who called themselves the Holy Club at Oxford was an impressive growth in his time. By the time that Wesley had passed away, the movement had started to grow to 72,000 members in the British Isles and 60,000 people in America. So during that time, he had to explore not just this big movement, but what this looked like at a local level. One of the things that we've talked about before is Wesley's means of grace. And he had these different stages. The prevenient grace, Pastor Karen talked about this as wooing, the God's presence in your life before you even know about it. And I'm going to go through this again because this is important when we get to this small group concept. Because then the next stage is justifying grace, that God is transforming your heart. And then the final stage is sanctifying grace, the time that you're going on to holiness in your life after you've accepted Jesus as your forever friend or Lord and Savior. Now, the reason this is really important, because I love this, I came across this week, and I'm going to talk about this a couple times. So Wesley was beginning to understand that justification, that time when God is working in your heart, that justification was not simply a one-time formal change where Christ's holiness was imputed in the believer. He was realizing and holding and embodying the gift of righteousness in the midst of a turbulent world. Wesley was facing a turbulent world. Can we relate to that? It was difficult for most people. One gap in the society structure, the big group, society structure that was that persons who were not in a band, small group, had no small group in which to seek encouragement or guidance. Let's look at that again. Wesley realized at this time that those who were trying to transform their lives through God working in their hearts, where they were trying to receive and live into their call for holiness in a turbulent world, when they did not have a small group, they were missing the opportunity for encouragement and guidance. So Wesley realized from the beginning that this small group was an essential way to live out our faith. I want to talk also about social holiness. Now, that sounds like a really complicated term, and when we think about it, it sounds very formal. But a key part to living out our faith is what Wesley called social holiness. Let's break that down. Social being among other people, holiness being of God, right? How do we not be socially holy? That is the church. That's who we are. Holiness is social because God is social. God created human beings in God's image to be relational creatures. We become fully human when we share into the relationship that God initiates with us through the people God places in our lives. Social holiness is the practice of obeying Jesus' commandments to love God with your heart, soul, mind, love your neighbor as yourself, and loving one another, fellow members of your congregation, of your community, of your church, of the world, as Christ loves you. When Wesley says that holiness is social, he means that the depth of your love for God is revealed in how you love those who God gives you. Now, the writer of 1 John describes the social nature of holiness, and he says, if you truly love God, then you must love your brother and sister in Christ and your neighbor. This requires you to be in relationships with people that God places alongside you in the church and people in your neighborhood, in your city. and in the world. We need community. And so what Wesley called society, we need that in order to live into the grace of God and nurture us into the persons God has called us to be. Our baptismal covenant describes the relationship with God, the baptized, and the church for a reason. The general rule of discipline provides a means for living into this covenant and becoming agents of social holiness. Let's take a look at this video.
Social holiness is unique to Methodism. United Methodists have a long commitment to social holiness. It is in our DNA. It is part of who we are. Wesley has said, there is no religion that is not social, no holiness that is not social. Wesley goes on to say that without social holiness, we cannot exist. It is because of God's love for us and Christ's love that we reach out into the world to walk with others and to accompany them in their journeys. Because social holiness is unique to us, it means that we must be in this together. We live our lives together, and we live our lives with all of God's creation. We walk with one another. We walk with those who are poor, those who are vulnerable, those who live on the margins of life. It is a gift that God has given us, and we have claimed as Methodists who are committed to social holiness that we would be with one another in this journey as we live our lives together.
Want to learn more about United Methodist beliefs? Visit umc.org/beliefs. To find a pastor to talk to and a church to visit, try Find a Church at umc.org/FAC.
So as the early Methodist, as the early Methodist movement was growing, they were recognizing the need for what we now would call Bible studies or small groups. At that time, they were calling it societies or classes or bands. And these bands, these groups were 5 to 10 people that voluntarily banded together for intense spiritual nurture and to support one another in the area of spiritual growth. They had women's bands, they had girls' bands, they had single people's bands, married people's bands, boy bands. We have boy bands too, but not in the same context. They also had classes. And these were different because they were larger and they were geographically oriented. And they included everybody in these different bands. So they realized this was essential, not just for personal growth, but it was also biblical. We look at the words that we have in Ephesians 2, 19 through 22. And this is from the Message version, and I just love the language. I sometimes use the Message for personal devotions, and I came across this one. I want to share this. That's plain enough, isn't it? You are no longer wandering exiles. This is Paul's letter. The kingdom of faith is now your home country. You are no longer strangers or outsiders. You belong here. With as much right to the name Christian as anyone, God is building a home. He is using us all, irrespective of how we got here. In what he is building, he used the apostles and the prophets for the foundation. Now he is using you, fitting you in brick by brick, stone by stone, with Jesus Christ as the cornerstone that holds all parts together. We see it taking shape day after day, a holy temple built by God. All of us built into it, a temple in which God is quite at home. This is Wesley's version of social holiness. Wesley preached that we needed to be connected in social holiness. He believed that we could only grow as Christians in a community surrounded by people of similar faith and conviction. Now, the Hebrew word for holiness is a word that highlights all things of sacred connection to God, in contrast to everything that's worldly. So the word holy refers to God and what belongs to God. This can be time, space, objects, or people. It can be anything that is of God. So this is who we are and have always been. However, we face the conflict of living in a world that is very individualistic. In a time that says we can do whatever we want, whenever we want. However, we don't need to look at statistics to know that that's not really going well for us. We see reports all the time that people are more lonely, more isolated than ever before. So I'm not sure this doing our own thing whenever we want with disconnection to anybody really works. Let's remember the words that we heard from Wesley earlier. One gap in the social structure was that persons who were not in a band or in a small group had no small group to seek encouragement and guidance. That's still relevant. We are social, God is social, we are faithful, and we truly need one another. We need the church community to encourage, or Wesley said, to provide guidance, to be accountable, to challenge, to support, to walk alongside us. And let me tell you something, if you don't need your church community now, you will one day. Is it perfect? No. Is it messy? Sure. Are there people that you don't like? Maybe. Could be me. But this is where we work out our differences and our conflicts. I've been reading some books by Fuller Youth Institute, and one of the things that they talk about is sticky faith. And I just love that language. Maybe we could call it strings attached, right? Sticky faith. We live in a cancel society. It is so easy. If you don't like it, you can delete it, you can erase it, you can walk away from it. And the thing is, when you walk away, you can blame that other person. You don't have to take any responsibility yourself. But here's the thing, when you stick it out, you realize you might have been at fault too. You might make some of the mistakes also. I don't know if you recall, but I think Pastor Karen shared a little while ago that word, that phrase, we can agree to disagree, actually came from John Wesley. Here's the thing, I think we're in a really unique time here at Trinity. You could say that maybe about other times, but I think this time is really special and really unique. I think it's special for the church too for a lot of different reasons, but I think this is a great time at Trinity. I think it's a great time to meet new people. I think it's a great time to witness in new ways. I remember the words of Ephesians. You are not wandering aliens. You belong here. For whatever reason brought you here today, you belong. You are here for a purpose. So on Ash Wednesday, our kids and youth were a part of our service. And one of the things that we invited them to do beforehand was we said, we are one church, and this is a chance for us to come together as one. We normally participate in the gym or the youth room, but today we are going to be in the sanctuary. And so we're going to sit here in this spot, but we invite you to consider meeting somebody new. Maybe meeting somebody you've never talked to before. And after the service, because one of our leaders is fantastic, Michelle and I were just ready to get the kids back to the gym and the youth room. But Mary said to them, do you want to meet somebody new? And they said, yeah. So we stopped and we paused and we came back into the sanctuary, and some of the kids kind of grouped themselves up to introduce themselves to somebody new. And it was hard and it was scary. And they said to us, they're like, how do I do it? This is scary. You guys are scary. Did you know that? It is hard to meet somebody new. And so we helped officiate this, and we kind of grabbed some people. I think Nancy and Charlie were great, and it was awkward. It was weird. These kids walked right up to them and said, "Hi, I'm Sergio. What's your name?" And they were looking at me like, "What are you doing here, Lori?" But they met people new, and it was hard, and it was awkward, but it was worth it. Because we are community. We are one church, and we need each other. And let me tell you something. I challenged you last time I was here that every child would have 5 people that know them by name. And I just want to tell you, that has mattered. That has made a difference. You guys are blowing the gates wide open in terms of intergenerational connection, and it is exciting. We have one of our youth that's going on our Redbird mission trip. He's going with a group of men and families and individuals and what it might be, but he's going alongside them, and that is exciting. That's a unique opportunity to a kid who really needs that. You're walking alongside him in discipleship. One of our small groups has decided that they want to connect with our youth small group. So our youth small group, when they meet twice a month in small groups, and so they're going to do a time where they mix. Michelle teased me that it's like speed dating. They're going to do some questions and answers and get to know each other. But hey, it works, right? That's an intergenerational connection. That's a new way for community. That's a way to grow sticky faith. And I think that matters. So I want to invite you, if you are not connected, get connected. If there isn't somewhere for you to connect, make one. Create one. If you don't know any new people, and you only know the people that you have always known, find some, because there's a lot here right now, and that's what makes it an exciting time for Trinity. The Christian church, we're going to look into this after Easter. We'll look into Acts and what was going on in the early Christian church. But the Christian church started in people's homes. The Methodist movement started in people's homes. There's a great story I love the stories about Susanna Wesley, who is John Wesley's mother. There's not a ton of great information about John Wesley's father, who was a pastor in England at that time. But there is a story about he goes away, and he is gone from his parish. He is pastoring the small parish, and the pastor who stepped in is dedicated to some non-interesting topic, and he's preaching on it. And Susanna Wesley takes her children aside, and she meets them in her kitchen, and she teaches them, and she provides community, and they're doing Bible study. Well, all the people from the church start going to Susanna Wesley's kitchen instead of the pastor who's preaching. So the conversations around that are really amusing, because she's all of a sudden has a much larger parish than the man who is preaching in Samuel Wesley's absence. So a lot of stuff was going around the kitchen table. It doesn't have to be really fancy programs. In fact, we're seeing complex programmatic scheduling doesn't work anymore in the church. In that sticky faith community, people prefer warmth. They prefer authentic connection. Where there are gaps in families in society, that is where the church can step in. That's where we can be a messy family all together, and that's what people want. They want strings attached. They want to work through conflict. We all do. We want to see what it looks like to walk alongside each other, to provide encouragement and support and guidance, just like John Wesley said hundreds of years ago. Does it mean we're always going to get along? No. But some of the best relationships that I've had, I don't know about you, but I know for me, sometimes the strongest relationships are the ones that have been through conflict. The one that you've had the tough conversation where you're like, hey, I think I might have offended you. Can we talk about this? Does it feel good to mess up? No. Does it feel good to fail? No. But sometimes we learn and we admire those who fail with grace and fail well. And maybe it's our season to do that. Maybe it's not, but maybe it's our time to walk alongside somebody who is. I think this is our opportunity to show the world that we aren't perfect, but we love each other, and we're here for each other, and we're growing together, and we're trying together. Pastor Karen has talked about this as being the training institute, right? To work through those non-perfect human relationships together in a small group, in a community, supporting and being accountable and providing guidance. We are called to be a family. We are called to belong, not to be perfect, but to be committed to one another, to strive to see the best in one another, to give each other the benefit of the doubt. This is what the book of Discipline is talking about when it's talking about the nurture of the church. 1 John 4:19-21 says, "We love each other because he first loved us. If someone says, 'I love God,' but hates a fellow believer, that person is a liar. For if we don't love people we can see, how can we love God that we cannot see? And he has given us this command: those who love God must also love their fellow believers." I've shared with you before, I listen to podcasts a lot, and for a season I was listening to Jen Hatmaker, and now I haven't in a while, but she went to this whole series about dating, and partially that's why I haven't been listening, but one of the things she talks about, and I can relate to, is she talks about, now that she's dating in her 40s or 50s or whatever it may be, she's like, I don't have any game. I'm not playing, I don't have any game. And I kind of relate to that myself. I don't know, if we're going to play these friend games, I don't have that game. I'm a loyalty person. If you know me now, you're stuck with me for the next 20 years. I don't know how to keep a grudge. I don't remember those details. But I think as a church, we're kind of called to do that too, right? We don't need to have game. We don't need to play these funny games. We just need to be there for one another, to stick it out through the messy times, to nurture each other, to be there for one another if it is a hard time. Church family that feels like real family is important, because real families can be broken. So we're the training facility. We can try this, we can model this, and you know what? We might just transform the world, because God's a part of this process. And that's the good news. And so as Methodists, we want to try this, because social holiness is who we are, and faith-based relationships matter. Amen.